Hi everyone. So in this video we will talk about database integration. So we have already have database up and running, but how can we connect to the database? I mean, if we are not using Nestjs, then it is easy. But we are using Nestjs, and there is a Nestjs Typeorm module provided by Nestjs to connect to any database. Let's say MySQL. I mean, Typeorm is actually specific, and on Typeorm you can use type as a Postgres, MySQL, or any relational database, and it provides integration in two different ways. One is a static initialization, where you just pass your credentials like username, password, database, host, and port. Another is a dynamic initialization, where you are going to get the credentials, this information, all the information from the config service, which is environment service, which will help you to fetch all the credentials at runtime. So here we are using Typeorm module.for root. There you just need to pass, okay, type is Postgres, host, port, username, password. Or the other thing is, if you are not fetching them directly from process.env, you have a Nestjs config service, then how it works? It works a little different. I mean, there are many ways to register a provider. So here what we are doing is Nestjs Typeorm module.for root. Inside imports, you are doing Typeorm module.for root async and passing the config module, and this config module will give us the runtime database URL or username, password, database, all these attributes at runtime through the config service. That's why we are using a dynamic initialization. Let's take a look onto these two together. Now let's see how we are initializing our database connection through these two different approaches. So we have our code. Here we are doing config module.for root, and here we can specify for root. I mean, config module is overall global. Then you can write Typeorm module.for root and for root async. These are two different variations we can use. These are two different ways we will talk about: Typeorm module.for root and for root async. I mean, these are the two different ways in which you can integrate with your database connection. I mean, Typeorm module manages it, but Typeorm module need your connection URL, username, password, host, port, all those things. So you can either use Typeorm module.for root, pass all the argument, or you use Typeorm module.for root async and then inject a config module config service, and using use factory method. I mean, this is just a way of registering a provider. Use factory, and we are passing config service, and then from config service it can get, either you can have just a database URL or just all the parameters like host, port, username, password, all these arguments together. This is a simple configuration. Here we are doing Typeorm module.for root async and this config service. So here we are trying to get username, password, host, port, db username, db password, and this is how we can initialize. Now there is another way is you can also try a dynamic initialization of this module. And how this dynamic initialization, it is just a little bit different how we deal with the static. In dynamic we will be using config service. So here we are going to create an external, independent Nestjs module like db module, which takes care of everything about database. I mean, this is a good approach. You can have a Redis module, database module, where you write a database service, database module. You can have a Redis module where you create a Redis pub sub, Redis module, Redis service, right? It's better to create these reusable pieces, and here we are using db module.ts, right? So that's this is the database module, and inside database module we will be initializing Typeorm module.for root async. So here we are planning to just create a database module as a Nestjs separate module, so that we can call just database module.for root, right? And you can say it's underneath, it is again using Typeorm module.for root async. So I just want to create a reusable database module so that you can use it in every project. So here I'm doing db module, and there is a static method for root. It is returning this for root async. You just pass config module config service, and you just need to write a use factory, right? So how this really looks like, get connection option. So here we are going to call another method, get connection option, that will give you the connection properties to initialize the database connection. So get connection options. Here we are doing config service and database config. Here if you see, the configuration is simple. It is returning an object with the type Postgres, database URL, SSL, entities, and synchronize false and logging false. Each and every line has their own specific meaning. The important thing is inside this Typeorm module, either you pass all these as a different argument like type, username, password, host, port, or if you don't like this, then you can just use a URL argument and pass the whole database URL there. So you don't need to have these explicit different variables, which is username, password, host, port, and all. So this is my database URL. I mean, I'm running a Postgres container. So my database URL is Postgres API development path localhost 5433 API database. And I'm passing this argument also SSL. If environment is local and test, then reject unauthorized false, otherwise false. So we are just passing a URL argument. I mean, I modified this method. Earlier we were thinking to pass all, but just combine everything inside a URL. URL contains your Postgres, username, password, host, port, almost everything. Okay, so that is what we are passing here inside dbconfig. Okay, so let's check the code. Okay, so this is my end-to-end build database module, which is a reusable and independent DB module. You can use the DB module .4root async or 4root, depends on, because this is user defined module, right? On top of that, you can define the static method, let's say 4root. So DB module .4root, and here you need to pass an object which contains entities. Okay, that's pretty much simple. This is how we initialize and integrate with the Postgres. And here you can say API database doesn't exist. That means I might not be passing the port correctly. So just fix the port 33 and just try to start the application and npm run start or run dev. And this time it has been connected to the application and application is running. So this is the overall summary, how you can do all these authentication things. So what we have covered? We have covered a Typeorm setup, right? Typeorm with the database. Now we will also talk about Redis. Redis can be a separate module where you can do all the Redis module, Redis service, and then the passport and express session related things.